One thing, and the most important thing, is that we find many burn chips in the dust. But what is interesting was if you're lucky to find an unreacted chip. And here is an experiment with an unreacted chip, but they are so small, so you have to believe me when I'm telling you what is happening here. The experimentalist is applying a microtorch here, a propane torch. And he's removing the torch from right to left, and on the left of the torch there is one of these little unreacted chips which I showed you a picture of before. And once the torch reached the chip, it takes off, and those sitting close can see a tiny yellow flame going out. And actually in this experiment, the experimentalist could feel that something was hitting his hand, but he couldn't find the particle afterwards. This has more successful in other experiments, but not in this one. But the scientific way of doing things, of course, is not applying a microtorch. It is to putting the thing into what we call a differential scaling calorimeter. It's an instrument where you can measure the heat exchange between the sample and the calorimeter. That is, you put in your little tiny chip, and you heat up the thing, and you record the heat exchange with the sample. And this is what's happening here. It's a blue curve. We are raising the temperature. This is 100 degrees, 200 degrees, 250 degrees, 300 degrees, 400 degrees. At 430 degrees, it goes off scale. So there is a very violent reaction, which is the ignition temperature is in the neighborhood, in this case, of 430 degrees centigrade. And afterwards, you can take out the chips and take a look. First, I'll show you, this is a chip which was subjected to the flame test. And you can see the formation here into metal iron. This is a lucky find from the dust. It is a lucky find in the sense that it is a semi-reacted chip. You'll see it's the red phase which is the active part of it. It's the iron oxide. It's red, like rust. It's this red phase, interesting. You'll see there's still remaining, actually, some of the unreacted thermite. And you'll see here this iron sphere is sticking to the chip. So the origin of this iron sphere is more or less certified. And of course, we can again apply the energy dispersion spectroscopy and certify the identity of the materials which is coming out here. The next picture shows chips which have come out of the differential scaling calorimeter. I told you this instrument where we heated up the chip slowly, and we saw this violent reaction at 430 degrees centigrade. Then we take out the chip, put it under the microscope, and it has been repeated again and again. And what you see here are these metallic spheres being formed. This here to your right is combustion products from, we call this nanothermite. Because as I told you, this is not the same kind of thermite as was discovered by Lynghard Schmidt more than 100 years ago. This is a kind of thermitic material which is produced by nanotechnological methods, where you build the materials from the bottom up. Some of you may be familiar with nanotechnology, where you are building nanostructures from the bottom up, from the atomic scale upwards, meaning first of all, that the particles are much smaller than you can obtain by simply dividing the aluminum, and meaning that the reaction is about roughly up to 100 times faster than between particles which you can make mechanically. Also, they are embedded in a polymer matrix, in plastic, which makes this material very, very versatile. You can paint it on, you can spray it on, you can make it into any shape you want, and without any fear of it exploding, and you could keep it semi-moist, and it is completely safe actually to handle. So we called it nanothermite. And here to the left is another one of my colleagues called Kevin Ryan, who is preparing nanothermite, because we know, even though this is military stuff, even the military scientists, for once, they have to brag once in a while when they're at symposia and conferences. So we know something about this nanothermite from conference proceedings, and they also have to put out reports once in a while because they have to apply for funding as well. And so we have an idea, not exactly how we make the red gray chips, but we can make material from recipes coming out, say, the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and the Los Alamos laboratories, which some of you, all of them are state military laboratories where they're doing this kind of research, which started, in our judgment, in the early 1990s. They started to use nanotechnology, making incendiaries and explosives. And so Kevin Ryan has made nanothermite in his backyard and ignited them. And so these are ignition products from our homemade nanothermite. And this is the ignition products from the red gray chips from the World Trade Center dust. Now, before I'm about to finish now, but I have to save one of David Chandler's video for this. It's very short. It's not very long, 3 or 4 minutes, because it tells, in my opinion, a story about the nanothermite, what I've just presented. And I have a bit, actually, of where the nanothermite fit into the collapse scenarios, even though I do not indulge in hypothetical collapse scenarios. I think it's an academic footnote, really. We have shown beyond doubt, that World Trade Center, the 3 skyscrapers, were taken down in controlled demolitions. And actually how it was done is something it's a pastime for academics, really. So I don't do that. But still, I'll point you to some very strange observations here now, because now you're going to see the South Tower. But there is a little follow-up on the pile driver theory. Because for the South Tower, what you saw here, what you're going to see here, for once, you're going to see explosions occurring above the impact point of the jet, of the airliner. In the South Tower, the impact point was about 20 floors below the impact point of the North Tower, around 76th floor. So the top section in the South Tower is a little bit higher. Let's say it's about here. But you can see explosions occurring above the impact point of the airliner. That's one thing. Another thing, as I told you almost 2 hours ago, was that the upper section of the South Tower starts tilting. Now, those of you who followed physics classes know that this is an angular momentum, when something is turning around. And an angular momentum, due to the conservation of a momentum, does not disappear. In plain words, this means that the top section should have fallen down like this. When it starts tilting, it should have continued. It doesn't. It disappears in open airs. It simply pulverizes in open airs. So this is a benefit of this video. But the reason why I have to hold it until this moment are 2 observations. First, you'll see fragments going down faster than free fall. You can compare this fragment with other fragments here, and you'll see fragments which are moving down faster than free fall. Now, how can something move to the ground faster than free fall? There's only one possibility here. Like if you go to Rådhuspladsen in Copenhagen and you go up in the tower and you fire a rocket down to the Pølsemand, be sure that the rocket will move faster than free fall. Another upset. So these projectiles coming out here, for some reason, they have been covered with something which has rocket fuel properties. We call them propellants. And let me just put in this. An explosive is something which develops a gas so fast that you have a pressure wave. An incendiary is something which acts by means of heat, but a propellant which you use as rocket fuel. There you have a gas evolution, but it is so slow, and so it only operates from the surface of the charge that you have the rocket effect. Otherwise, you don't see the rocket exploding. It would be a very bad outcome. So, explosive, incendiary, propellants. What you see here actually is maybe all these three properties merge into the same observation, because you'll also see another object coming out and then changing direction 90 degrees. You'll see a fragment coming out here, and then it goes like that. If you throw a stone, it follows a parabolic trajectory. But this rocket comes out, and then it suddenly just makes a right turn. Explain this, please. David Chandler again.
Hey, Professor.
Yeah.
Would you like maybe to stand?
I will, yes.
This is the destruction of the South Tower of the World Trade Center, viewed from a helicopter to the south. This particular video clip is rich in details that call the official story into question. Notice the numerous explosions on the west side of the building above the impact point. As the top 30-floor section falls, it tips to the east. It starts off intact, but then it disintegrates in midair. Gravity alone could not cause the top section to disintegrate. When an object is in free fall, there are no internal stresses. It should have hit the ground in one piece, but it didn't. Some of the debris is clearly being accelerated by forces other than gravity. These effects can be caused by late firing explosives, which can produce a white smoke trail. White smoke, consisting of aluminum oxide, is a byproduct of the thermite reaction. While producing this video, I ran across one rocket projectile I had not seen commented on before. This one stopped midair and changed directions. Even taking perspective effects into account, this projectile lost one component of momentum and gained another. That requires an impulse. Note that the rocket trail does not point back to the building, but the point where the impulse occurred. Let's take it from the top. There's a lot going on. Watch for the smoking guns.
Yeah, I'm about to finish. But before I do that, a few practical things. Wonder where do we go from here? I will give not this presentation. This is a special presentation for scientifically minded people. But I have my standard presentation, which is more oriented for laymen. I give in regular intervals. The next one will be November 10th here in Copenhagen. And there'll be somebody standing down here or going around with flyers. If you think somebody should hear about the destruction of World Trade Center, you can take a flyer and take it along. We have plenty, you can have one each. Another thing is, you don't hear about this in the mainstream press. And I took a poll in the start, how many had seen Building 7? Please notice that this is not shown in the main press. When I saw Building 7 the first time, I was stunned. This is 4 years ago, because I thought World Trade Center were the two towers. And here I saw Building 7. Somebody told me this was World Trade Center. What? Apparently it was the most mysterious collapse in modern architectural history. And nobody had told me about that. How come? And so if you want to know about this, you could go on Google when you come back and just write WTC7 and take it from there. But if you have to get up early in the morning, attending school or picking up somebody in the kindergarten, you bring somebody, you shouldn't do that because you'll get to bed very late. Take care when you go on the web, because there's a lot of nonsense out there. That is how you do it. If you want to suppress something, you just spam the subject with misinformation. So here is also a little memo where each of you can actually get a piece of paper with recommended websites which are reliable. And there's also, hey, what happened here? The major Danish website is called inthe11thhour.dk, where you can sign up with your name and picture if our only political claim here as scientists is that you should investigate this event. 3,000 people were killed on 9/11, but it has never ever been investigated as a crime. It's true. And we think I'm opposed to crime, and I think that crime should be investigated. So this is what you can do actually if you go to the 11th hour. There is much more information actually from there, and it reflects what you call the truther community. I have, if you want to be on the, I'm sorry this is in Danish, but if you want to be on the mail list for this next presentation of mine, or the coming presentation, they're going on regular interest, please put your email address on a little piece of paper and give it to me. And I'll make sure you'll be on the mailing list coming out about 10 days before the event. But please write so I can read it, okay? Because otherwise you will never get it. And another thing is what you can get free here is an essay on the Afghanistan war, and you can also get an essay on whistleblowers from the American intelligence services and the military services. But there will be some restrictions. Actually, you have to persuade me if you want to. You have to swear that you read it. But one thing you can get for free is I brought 20 copies of David Chandler's work. Here's the one we have been relying heavily on tonight. This American teacher who explains things. So all the videos you've seen here, you can see again and more. I have only 20 copies, so if you're a couple, please only take one. But if you're not into physics at all, you can have a free DVD. Oh shit! I really lost my last point here. You can also get a free DVD with various videos for more civilians. But there are 20 of them as well. This is for you to enjoy, and it is free, all of it. You can also buy 2 of Griffin's book. If you have 150 kroners, I'll sell you a book here. Now, this is the goddess of justice. In Danish, it's called Justitia. And she's usually pictured blindfolded and carrying a balance and a sword, meaning that her decisions should be taken when considering only the facts objectively. Science should work in the same way, but time has proven it is not so easy to actually acknowledge the data. But still, we see that justice is blind, and in principle, science is blind, but we are not dumb. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Okay, questions if you have any, and let's have a talk and turn up the lights eventually.
Yes.
If there are any questions, yes, please.
What was inside
What was inside Building
Building 7?
7? Yeah, there were several tenants, which are interesting. Maybe I can go to another presentation here. CIA had, yeah, actually, they really had, here are the tenants of Building 7, okay. And of course there were some financial institutions which are not really important, Maybe the Salomon, Smith and Barney had the upper 20 floors. So in the BBC broadcast, it's called the Salomon Building. But the Pentagon had offices in the building, so had the Internal Revenue Service. CIA had their biggest office, had their secret New York headquarters in the building. It was revealed a few days later in the New York Times. Secret Service had also their biggest office outside Washington, D.C. And Secret Service is a very important body in the American power structure because they take over charge immediately if the president and the vice president are not available for fast decisions in catastrophe situations. This Securities and Exchange Commission, many people think is very interesting because it's something in Danish. It's a crossing between Bagmandspolitiet and the Stock Exchange Police, Børstilsynet, and it's a body which monitors all occasions of fraud and corruption in corporate America. And at that time, these officers, they had between 3,000 and 4,000 unfinished cases in their keeping, and all these files were lost. Meaning, and they only had partly backup of it. I mean, it was all of the WorldCom scandal from California, and a big chunk of the Enron scandal, which most people are aware of. But actually, how many cases were lost has not even been determined. But some people had interested in this. And also on the 23rd floor was an Office of Emergency Management, which is also very interesting. Nobody understood why they should have it there, and it was very special. Rudy Giuliani had established that. So Building 7 was a governmental building, and it was heavily guarded and by security. It was really a federal building. Yes, if there are no further questions, we are okay.
How do you put out a thermite fire if you bump into
How do you put it out? You cannot put it out. No. But it was kind of low intensity what was occurring. I can give you a whole presentation actually on the emission of chemicals which occurred in the sewing. If you're familiar with something very strange came up on specific days, there were eruptions like geysers coming out of the rubble with styrene, toluene, benzene, propylene, and a very weird compound called 1,3-diphenylpropane, which we cannot figure out where it should come from. So there was really something going on in the rubble which was a witch's brew of chemical reactions. Yes, with the column.
The whole underground area of this whole complex, the World Trade Complex,
Yeah.
is there any chance that the collapse of the two towers somehow compromised the foundation of Building 7?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Particularly, I can say there were 7, under the two towers, there were 7 stories underground. And the strange thing is that there actually was explosions occurring in these basements prior to the collapse. This has been extensively witnessed. Maybe we should go back to the explosion of the witnesses here. At that point, I promised this early on, because strangely there were explosions going on in the basement under the two towers prior to collapse. People were terribly injured. And the most famous witness here is a man called Bobby Rodriguez, who was a janitor actually, and he was the last person leaving the towers before they collapsed. And he's traveling around giving witness of this. Now regarding explosions, and now I'm talking about the towers exclusively. The fire chief of New York City, very cleverly, after the event, all the firemen to sit down and tell to a microphone what they experienced on the day. They were not asked any questions. They were simply told, please sit down and tell us what happens to the records. Now, what they said was classified as secret. But in America, you can do something, you can submit a FOIA, which is a Freedom of Information Act request, and get out these documents. And after some years of fighting, we actually had access to these testimonies. There was roughly 500 total. 500 firemen who sat down unprovoked to just tell them what happened. 123 of these told about explosions. And one may wonder how many of them would have reported explosions if they had been asked. Now these are the two towers. As I told you about 7, the number of witnesses are much less, for that simple reason that the whole area had been cleared all afternoon. Everybody was expecting 7 to come down. The fireman said, hey, stay out of here, this building is going to come down. For some reason, everybody knew. And but there are explosions. There's also video evidence, which I could play for you if I took the time. It's on my laptop, where people are standing in the telephone booth and boom, explosions are going on around them. And you can hear, actually those people standing on a distance outside the borders can hear the clapping sound of explosions when the building comes down. So on the towers, the witnesses of explosions are abundant, but for building 7 it is less, but thermite is absolutely soundless. But it makes no sound, it only hisses. But regarding the balance between thermite and explosives, let me say this. What I anticipate, what I imagine, thermite is not so fast, and to get the free fall in 7 and the completely symmetrical means that the last part of the structure has to be taken down in a very accurately timed sequence of explosions. Only explosions can do that. The seismic track is 18 seconds long, and obviously something is occurring up to the collapse moment. So what they're doing, and you also saw the demolitions I told you, they're taking out the structure in sections because the buildings are always over-dimensioned. So what is left for the last blow is only what is needed to hold the building up. And then it's taken down by explosives. So probably, this is my picture, it's speculation, most of the steel structure was taken down by incendiaries because it's cutting the steel beams without making sounds, and it's efficient, and you don't have to use so much of it. And then in the final moments, we saw also that the towers, obviously explosions are at work here. The towers did not collapse. They were blown up from the top down. You saw these girders coming out, enormous powers in play there. So it's an interplay actually of 2 different kinds of incendiaries. Nanothermite is only one. I haven't had time to talk about the second one. And explosives. We don't know the chemical nature of the explosives. We can guess. We don't know. So much for explosions and incendiaries and stuff.
I have a question.
Please.
What is the amount of people who work in towers?
Where when the towers came down, close to 3,000 people were killed. The total number of people working in World Trade Center were 50,000. Many of them, for some reason, were not on work on that day, including top officials. Actually, they were strikingly absent, including the owner of the building. His name is Larry Silverstein. Every morning he was usually taking his breakfast on the restaurant called A View of the World, but for this morning he had to go to the dentist. And many people actually got out of the towers in time. So the number of people being killed, the collapse of the Twin Towers, were 3,000. When Building 7 came down, 0 were killed.
Do you know how many people who came down?
Well, that is an estimate. I don't know, but it is noticed in the NIST report that the population of workers were less than normal, and it was ascribed to the beautiful weather and the fact that the New York schools had their first school day on that day, so they NIST anticipate that many people were either shopping on their way to work or they were attending the first day in school for their preparatory, what do you call it, undergrad, the small first class school, kindergarten, what do you call it, prep school, yeah. So that's the explanation. But so the exact numbers, it is not something I walk around and remember because I don't think it's really interesting. But 3,000 people were killed in the towers. It's the same number of soldiers which were killed at Pearl Harbor. Yes, please.
Silverstein went out in the press and told us about they wanted to pull the building.
Yeah, I pulled that video out because I want to stick to science. You want to see it?
Yeah.
Cheat. What's happening here? Why doesn't this work? Strange. Maybe, yeah, okay. My computer is cheating on me. Oh, I know why. Now I know why. This is because we showed the tenants. And here we come with Larry Silverstein. Let's see again. Okay, let's see what happens now.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. And the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.